All right. The St. Patrick's Day special. Okay, Madison tomorrow. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Explain what that means. How is that your team accountability thing?
So basically, my accountability thing is after practice, talking with my partner about good and bad, because I want to know like something that I've improved on and then something that I can work on. And I think having both of them is good, because if you only look at the bad, you're gonna like devastate yourself. And then if you're only looking at the good, then you'll be overconfident. So I think it's like a good middle.
So how does that help the team?
Well, I think by me doing it, having that feedback period is going to make you better mentally and physically as a player, because then like you're focusing on it, so you're going to get better at it. And by me doing it and then like having different partners, it's going to like influence them, and when they do it, they're going to realize it, and then they either keep doing it or just do it when I ask them.
So you go with somebody different every day?
Well, I've mostly been doing it with Liv because she's been my partner, but I'm not doing the roster thing anymore. I just do like who I'm with that day, because they're seeing me the most, and like I see what they're doing the most.
Okay, so how can you make sure that it's still impactful for the whole team?
Well, in some ways too, like everyone that stays around after practice sees me and Liv talking, so they'll either like hear it or like they're seeing it, and like it's making an impact on me and my partner. So it's like they're getting to visualize and see that.
So it's basically like you're being a good example of someone who's actively seeking feedback from others.
Yeah.
So do you think that it's, you said it's mostly with the person that you were with that day. Is that the person you feel like gives you the most valuable feedback?
Not always, but I think like no matter what, like if you're hard on yourself, at the end of the day, your feedback's going to be like sometimes the best for you. But like having another set of eyes and ears on you is good too. Depending on, like there's certain people in the team that are going to give better feedback than others. But it's also like when I talk to my partner, I'm mostly telling them my good and bad. I'm not telling them about them. So like they'll tell me their good and bad, and then like I can add to it too, of like, oh, I saw you did this good today, or you could work on this.
So you said some people give better feedback than others. Like, what does better mean?
I think like sometimes, especially girls, will just be like, oh yeah, like you did so good today. But I think better or good feedback is like more technical and not just like, oh, you did good on hitting, like what about the hitting, like certain technique and like stuff like that.
Yeah. So how do you like get somebody that is not great at giving feedback to like give you valuable feedback?
Well, I can tell them to be honest with me, and then also like once I say it, I can be like, what else?
So you like push them a little bit. And so also you're saying that like part of the way that you respond to them like gives them a different level of comfort of what type of feedback they give you, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think like something I could add too is like I can make myself go first so that they can hear like how I do it, and then it's like, okay, I could go deeper with it by what they do.
Right. So you're basically forcing people to say something bad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because definitely the way that you act when people are giving you feedback like sends a message to the person about what kind of feedback they can give you, right? Like if you're the type of person who's always like, but this, but that, blah, 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 then people are gonna be like, okay, well, whatever, you asked me. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, you think you do a good job of like, just like, what's the way that you receive the feedback?
Well, something that I was thinking about when I was like writing my questions is me and my parents would used to like go to the court by our house, and I would always get in trouble for saying like I know. Like once they would tell me something, I'd be like I know. And so like the more that I like thought about it, and the more that my parents would like get on to me, it's like a coachable thing, I feel like. And so whether you agree with the feedback or not, I think you should like thank the person for going out of their way like to tell you. And like whether you agree with it or not, like you can like be like, well, this is what I see, but at the end like they're just trying to help you. So I think like just being like thank you, and then like thinking about it yourself and either like doing it or not doing it. But I think by not trying it, you're not reaching your full potential of like what somebody tells you.
So even when you disagree with something, you're like trying to do it or trying to like assume that it's true.
Well, it makes me like want to get better at it so that they don't tell me anymore too. And it's like it makes me aware whether I agree with it or not. It's like that's what my opponent sees, and so I either need to like disguise it or like be better at it.
Right. So if someone's telling you like, yeah, I feel like you didn't hit enough balls today, like you didn't hit enough hard-driven balls, and you feel like you did, what is the process of like accepting that information? How does that information like get processed in your head?
Well, I feel like at first it's kind of like makes you mad, anybody, but then like that either means that I wasn't hitting hard enough and like they see that as like not a hit, or like the next day it's like I need to be hitting more.
So what you're saying is that when people tell you stuff, you imagine that it's true. That's not like a trick question. It's like,
I mean, I think you should think about it. It doesn't have to be true, but I think you should process what they said.
so if someone tells you something that you instinctively disagree with, are you being like, okay, thank you, but inside you know they're wrong? Or are you going, did I do this or not do that? Like, which way are you like handling that?
I think I always tend to be like, thank you, and then like I'll think about it, and then if they keep doing it, then I'll explain myself of like, this is why I'm doing this. But at first, I feel like it's their first time telling you something, they're gonna see how you react too, because it's like, if you tell me something and I'm like, you're not gonna tell me again, because like you don't think I'm taking the feedback. Whereas like if I accept it the first time and then you tell me again and it's like, oh, I'm doing this because of this.
So like if your partner tells you, yeah, you're not giving me the right shot calls, and you feel like you were, you're basically gonna the next day be like, okay, well, let me just double check with myself that I'm like definitely doing what I think I'm doing, right?
Yeah, but I also think outcome plays a big part too. Like if I'm giving a shot call and they're not scoring, then, I mean, if my shot call's right, then that's on them. But if I'm giving the wrong shot call and she's missing, then it's like my fault.
Right.
So I think it's like a good balance.
Yeah, I think, I personally think that it's really, really valuable. And I think you're good at this. I think you're really good at this. Is when people tell you stuff, you entertain the idea that it could be true. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like even when maybe you're like, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I agree. Mm-hmm. You entertain the idea that it could be true. Like most people, when you give them feedback, it either aligns with what they think about themselves or it doesn't. And if it doesn't align with what they think about themselves, they immediately they sort of reject it inside. Yeah. They may not show it, but they're kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, cool. But then they're like, okay, that's not true.
Yeah, I think pride is like a big thing too, because I think by hearing that, it's like nobody wants to like know or think that they're like have any wrongs, you know? So like for me, it's like, what? Because I want to be good at everything, and everyone tries to be perfect, and so like knowing that you're not, I think it's like hard to swallow, but like you have to be able to do that to like reach potential and like get better.
So, do you think that makes you? Do you think that you are good at taking feedback because you're a people pleaser? Or do you think it's a different thing?
I think it helps to be a people pleaser.
Because sorry to interrupt, but like, do you think that you are good at listening to people's feedback because you want them to think good things?
I mean, I think that does play a role because like with somebody that doesn't care what people think, it can be like, well, you know, like say somebody that's high in the lineup that doesn't care what other people think, and they're like, well, it doesn't matter, I'm playing. You know what I'm saying? Whereas like somebody that could be lower is like gonna listen to everybody's feedback because they want to play a higher seed, you know? But I think for me personally, I am a people pleaser, so I think that helps. But I also know that at the end of the day, like I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and like it doesn't matter what people think, but at the same time, like that's part of life, and like their opinion matters too, but like my opinion matters most.
Yeah.
I think.
Have you ever had a coach who has told you something that you just don't agree with?
I think not something that I don't agree with, but I think like I obviously have my style of play that either fits like somebody else's, or even like sometimes like when we do drills in practice, it's like gets really chaotic and like we're trying multiple things, and like for myself I just need to keep it simple because this blonde brain can only hold so much. But I feel like it's like good to try all these things and like have all the tools, but like have my style of play and like what I like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, yeah. Well, what else?
Use some questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you think it's important to face good and bad, or positive and negative, about yourself as a player?
Because I think it's important to be objective. I mean, because I know the feeling of playing in matches and like doing some good things, but doing more bad things than good things, but only remembering the good things. Mm-hmm. And that's like not accurate. You know, you may remember like a couple good plays you really had, or a couple really good plays that you had, but then, yeah, maybe you didn't pass well the whole game or whatever. And then on the flip side, you may actually have played a really good game, and maybe you hit the ball out on game point or something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's really important to be able to look at sort of the data, and I don't mean like statistics, I mean to look at like all of the instances that you can of what happened, not just in the game, but in practice or whatever. I mean, it's weird because I think everyone's motivated by different things. Like some are motivated by positivity and some are motivated by negativity. Mm-hmm. And so I think like in order to grow or get better, you basically have to have either positively or negatively, you have to be pulled or pushed out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you did something good that you don't normally do, it should be really rewarded, and you should be like, oh, I want to chase that feeling more, mm-hmm. you know? Or if you're failing at something, like, it needs to be uncomfortable to fail. It needs to be like a not cool thing to fail. Yeah. So you need to be like, I don't want this feeling anymore. I'm going to work to like not be this way anymore. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you don't truly seek out like honest feedback, then you're just sort of like a watered down version of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I think about that all the time with like, have you ever had a friend, or I guess you haven't really had coworkers or bosses or anything?
Say you don't have a friend.
Yeah. Have you ever had a friend?
Yeah.
Probably not. Like anybody that you like feel like you can't say something to, but like like it would help them if you're like this person needs to know this, but they can't like accept it. They won't be able to take it. That's like just flip it. Like imagine if you're that person. Then like I don't want, for me as a coach, like I don't want people to hold back what they're thinking, because that could potentially help me be better in some way.
Yeah.
That also means I have to be willing to accept opinions that are harsh that I might not agree with, which is the really hard part about it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like a risk that I think is worth it. It's like I'd rather hear people's opinions that are harsh, that I may not agree with, and as a trade-off, maybe I'll get some like really honest feedback in ways that can actually help me be better. Because if you care about being better, then you should care about like honesty.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think it's interesting that, like, for me, I chose good and bad to like have a good balance, but you know how like most people will be like 2 goods and 1 bad, or like there's like games and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Do you think that I should do that, or like depending on the person, like if they're negatively like driven, then do 2 negatives and 1 positive? Or do you think like it's good to have a good balance?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Part of me wants to say, if I was doing what you're doing, I would probably ask people, what are the things that stand out the most about like whatever my performance today? And if it's good,
before I say it.
Yeah, if I was doing it, just me personally, that's probably what I would do. Is I would say, hey, what are the 2 things that stand out the most about me and my performance today in practice? And if they say good things, cool. If they say bad things, cool. Like, because whatever the most, like, the first thing that comes to their mind is probably the strongest thing that I was giving off.
Right.
Like if someone was like, yo, you were killing it today. You were hitting every ball. You were getting blocks. Like, cool. If someone says, yeah, you were kind of like really negative on yourself today, like the negativity sort of like brought me down sometimes, like, then that's sort of like the dominant thing that you did that day. So, I do think it's valuable to do both in some ratio. I don't know if the ratio matters, but I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think personally, well, kind of like what I said at the beginning, I think like I need a good balance, because if I'm too positive, then it's like I need more feedback. Like it feels weird to be too positive. And then like if it's negative, then I don't strive in that environment. So I think it's like a good middle for me.
So why do you think too much negativity is bad?
Well,
like too much negative feedback, like too much, like if I'm only telling you what you're doing wrong, why is that bad?
well, I think like,
Because you don't like it?
no, I think it's like a confidence thing of like, if I'm only thinking about the negative, then like it's going to get to a point of like, what am I good at? Like, what can I do on the court to even score? Like in my head. But like in games, it's like you want to have that confidence mindset, whereas like in practice, you want to harp more on like the negative. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To like get better. But that kind of goes along with my next question of like, is faking it till you make it truly the best tactic to like work or get better at something?
Well, yeah, that's a good follow-up question, because like on one hand, you could make the argument that like, I guess before I answer that question, do you think that it's, as a player, do you think that the things you're good at are more important, or the things you're bad at are more important in terms of like your potential? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think good, because that's what's going to carry you. But like, for example, like when we talk about I'm stronger on offense than defense, well, that's like a good problem to have, even though like I need to get better at it because it will make me a better player and like give me more wins. But at the same time, if I'm scoring off a serve receive and then I don't get that defense, it's like gonna go back and forth until we get like a defense play. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like you can still win with that weakness, and like you can hide your weaknesses in games, whereas like you can still work on them in practice.
So that's. I guess, do you think that people win because of their strengths or lose because of their weaknesses? Like, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it that we should be building up our strengths because that's what's going to get us the results? Or is it that we should be fixing our weaknesses because that's what's going to hold us back?
That's a good question. I don't know, because also I think it comes down to like how low or how high is your weakness. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like what is the depth of that? Because I think like if your weakness is like average and like you're super strong at something, then like that's a good average to have. Whereas like if it's really drastic, then you could win or lose really big.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason I ask is because like, I mean, obviously I think it's both, but
yeah,
because that should inform what type of feedback we're giving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you believe that your strengths will carry you, then the feedback you should seek should be like related to your strengths, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, that's the quality you want to develop.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like you're being held back because of something, some weakness, or even a strength that you're not like performing at the highest level that you can be, if that's going to hold you back, then that's the feedback you should seek out, you know? So I guess it is both, because, you know, but, and I was thinking that because like when you ask about faking it till you make it, you know, I interpret that as like
acting like you're good at something when you're not.
well, yeah, and I think about that in terms of like how you're receiving feedback. Like, can you really like handle negativity, like not negativity, negative feedback, like feedback on things you're not doing well? Like, you do have to have a certain amount of confidence to fall back on,
Right.
to be able to seek out. Like, a good example is like, you know, we do those surveys, right? That I give you guys out about coaches, about us. And they're pretty like, I think they are pretty good at like seeking out honest feedback, like telling you to complain about us and telling you like, what would you do differently and all this stuff. Like, we're definitely probing for like criticism. But where I'm at and we're at as coaches, like we can sort of handle that
Right.
criticism because we can like fall back on our own like confidence basically. So do you think that like the type of feedback you can receive is like based on how confident you are? And that's sort of like kind of to get at your question is like, can you fake that?
Yeah.
Like-
I think confidence does play a big role, because if you get the negative feedback and you're like a positive person, then it's like your world is like destroyed, because it's like a big blow to your ego, because it's like, oh, I'm actually bad at something. Whereas like also if you're negative and you get more negative feedback, it's like you're just gonna like downfall and you have nothing to lean on. Whereas like if you have confidence and you're getting negative feedback, it's like, okay, I can take that. And then if you're like getting positive feedback, it's only helping you as like a confident person, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because it's like, how do you tell someone that doesn't have a lot of confidence, how do you tell them things that they're not doing well?
yeah.
You know?
And I think like depending on confidence, it's like also a thing of like where people will ask like, do you want feedback?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
like that's a normal thing too now, where it should be just like the feedback given.
Right.
But people get like hurt or like can't take it, and I think that is a confidence thing.
Do you think that, I have two questions about that. Do you think that it's my job as a coach to deliver feedback in the way that's most well received by each individual? Because, you know, like, I can give the same feedback to different people and they'll handle it different ways. Like,
Yeah.
there's certain people on the team that like don't do particularly well with like being told like they messed up.
Yeah. I think, well, there's two ways to like go about it too. I think like committing here and like knowing what we got into with like you as a coach and like knowing you as a coach is one thing, and like when you address the group as a whole, I think like you should be able to shoot it straight because like we should be able to trust you and accept that. But I think also when you coach us as pairs, it's like good to know what we strive in. But I don't think you should have to like cater to our needs, but I think it's like important to know, but I think it's more on the players and like knowing ourselves and like trying to, or like a big thing that I've been doing is like trying to take the feedback and not the tone. I think that that's really important.
Yeah. No, that's good. So, but what would you do in a situation where it's like, okay, it should be on the players to be able to accept feedback in whatever manner seems natural to me, because we've sort of come to that, we have this like agreement of like, I'm going to give you feedback in the way that makes sense to me, and it's your job to like sort of take that. Maybe that's how it should be, maybe, but what if it just doesn't work? Like, if I'm being honest about what I'm seeing, but people are responding, their performance is declining because the feedback isn't being given to them in the way that, they want.
I think it's on the player until they address it with you.
Because it's like, to use a different example, like the person we referenced earlier, the person that's like not good at receiving feedback, like the person that you want to tell something to, but you can't because they wouldn't handle it well. Well, you could make the argument that like, well, they should be able to take feedback because it's like, this is good for them. But they can't, so like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Do you give it to them and then wade through the damage after that? Or do you ask them for permission? Do you because it's like, it should be that I should be able to just say what I'm seeing and not overthink how I'm delivering it.
Yeah.
But that's definitely not the reality of like coaching, right? Or even like giving feedback to a partner. You should be able to be like, hey, get me tighter, or whatever. But some partners
Shut down.
Yeah, if you're like, hey, I need you to side out here, then they're like, or whatever, something,
Yeah. I think it's like on the player to a certain extent, because even like you're gonna face negative and positive feedback regardless, like whether it's volleyball or your job or like moving on in life, so that's a lesson that you have to learn. But I think like if it's getting to a point where it's like a decline in their performance, it's like a conversation they need to have with you of like, hey, I hear what you're saying, but like if you could deliver it better, then maybe like I could take it better.
Yeah.
But I think like it's on the player to like develop that sort of skill.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point.
On the faking it till you make it, I feel like kind of like what I said earlier, I feel like in a game situation, that's when it should be used, because practice should be a thing where you're like exposing your weaknesses and like trying to get better. But I think in a game situation, if something that is normally good, say like my passing is a strength, and then like I'm shanking balls, I think like faking it till you make it is more of like a mindset and like body language thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like they're not going to keep picking on me because I look confident,
Yeah.
But I don't think it's necessarily like should go along with your skills.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like game is not the time to be like picking apart someone's game. It's like we got to keep confidence high. But do you think that people think that way about practice, like the way you do? Because like practice is a time where like what you're describing is that practices mostly should be moderately frustrating at times.
Yeah.
Because you're purposely picking apart parts of your game that like are not perfect.
Yeah.
Do you think people think that or know that going into practice?
I mean, I think people treat practice differently. It shouldn't be that different. And I think like that's what we've been talking about as like a team of why aren't we playing the same as we play in practice? And I think there has to be a good balance of, okay, practice is a time to try things, but I also need to be calling myself out where it's like a game, it's not as different. Like practice how you play, but also practice is an environment to get better and try things and like work on things. But I think it shouldn't be so drastic, and like that's why we aren't getting the results we're getting in games, you know? So there has to be a certain amount of pressure, but also a certain amount of like allowance, you know?
Yeah.
What I'm saying?
Do you think that it would help the skills transfer more if we treated the practice environment more similar to the game environment in terms of feedback? Because it wouldn't, this is my opinion, it wouldn't develop us as well, but it would be more similar to the environment of competition, which theoretically would mean the transfer would be better.
The consistency.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like, yes, it should be more like consistent across the board for like game and practice in the spring especially. I think in the fall that's like the most important time to like get better, and like there should be like, okay, why did we practice this way and then play this way? Because that's the time to like develop. But I think in the spring it should be pretty consistent across the board, in my opinion.
Yeah. So what would you be doing differently than what we're doing right now, basically?
I think like in the fall I like tried to like jump set or like do different kind of plays or like get more uncomfortable than I do now, because it's like I'm trying to create the same environment now. And so I think that is also helping with confidence going into games too, because it's like I'm not going to do anything that I wouldn't do in practice, you know?
Right.
So, but do you think by like doing my good and bad with like the person that I'm doing it with, do you think that by me imposing it upon them, that they are just as invested as I am? Like, do you think that I'm making them better, or like that it's working even though like they may not be as invested in like the good and bad as I am?
Yeah, I do, which is why I actually think that it needs to be I think you need to go back to doing it with different people every day.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really good example of, I'm about to sneeze. It's a really good example, like, for someone to see one of their peers very maturely handling difficult feedback is, like, to me, really powerful. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of like why I feel a huge responsibility whenever players give me feedback. I feel a huge responsibility to make sure I receive that feedback in a way that I want them to receive the feedback.
Yeah.
So like, I try to model that behavior in a way that's like, if you tell me something tough, I'm gonna like entertain the idea that it's true, and I'm gonna hear you, and I'm gonna like go home with it, and I'm gonna think about it, and I'm gonna like think about where the truth in it is. Even though like, yeah, your perspective is different, like I'm still gonna do that. So I think when you do that, when you model that, like when you come to people and you say, hey, I think I struggled with this, I think I did this well, what do you think? And if they say, I think you struggled with this actually, and you're like, okay, yeah, I hear that. If you just like, when you're just like taking that, it like lets the walls down, you know, so people feel like, okay, well, I'm gonna feel pretty dumb if like she tells me something bad, and I'm like, well, but blah, 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 blah. Like you're very clearly gonna look immature if you do that. So
right.
Like, what you're doing is you're basically teaching and showing people how to be mature and maturely receive feedback. And you're like taking them by the hand and like leading them.
Making them do it, yeah.
Yeah, but like in a really good way, in a really like humble way. you know?
Yeah.
So I think it is really good. I think the only downside to what you're doing is that it's not enough, basically. Like,
Yeah.
you're not having an influence on enough people,
Right.
you know? You should almost like, yeah, do different people every day. And it is hard because they're not necessarily seeing you, paying attention to you, but maybe, I don't know.
Asking different
think about
people
that
instead of just letting them see me do it.
Yeah, or like talking to them before and telling them to like, hey, like you're gonna be my person today, so like watch me when you're off, whatever.
Okay.
Have an opinion about my performance today.
Something I just thought of too is like, I feel like I receive feedback really well, but I'm not like always good about telling other people because.
So you're the person that's like, you hit really good today.
I mean, like I'll say it, but like I have a hard time like telling other people because like I don't want to hurt their feelings.
So okay, yeah. So why? Because you're a people pleaser?
Yeah, but I'm trying to get better at it. But I feel like why is that? And do you think that other people, like say it's reverse or like they're good at both, like does it affect everyone differently? Or like, because I feel like I can still get to the point, but it's kind of like I'm not going to shoot it as straight. But like, why is that if I can receive feedback good?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of similar. I think because I want people to tell me literally whatever they think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I don't necessarily care how I get it. I mean, I don't like when people are like rude necessarily, but
Yeah.
like I like knowing like when we have an agreement that we're gonna be honest, like, and people give me honest feedback, like whether it sucks or not, like I really value knowing that. But like I think a lot about how I'm delivering the message to other people.
Yeah, that's.
Why is that? I mean, it's a good question. Like, I mean, part of it probably for both of us is a little bit of like people pleasing quality, but also, you know, like I think deep down we know that like a lot of people don't handle honesty well.
Yeah.
I mean, they just don't. People are like you said, they're protective of their ego, and ego meaning like they're protective of their sense of identity. Like they that was Elena. People are really protective of their sense of self and their sense of identity. So whenever you tell them something that like potentially is like gives them a different picture of who they are, like people don't like that.
Yeah.
That's a very uncomfortable thing. If you're the type of person that's like, my identity is like ever changing and ever growing, and I'm encouraging that, then you're open to feedback. But if you're like insecure and you're holding on to the things that you're like really good at or the things that your strength, you know, and people are telling you like your deepest fears and they're like that you're true, like, hey, you're being awkward. Oh, my deepest fear is being awkward. It's like people are more fragile, like they're not as confident, and like that's where I think the positive feedback is really important, because you know, positive feedback is a way to like boost someone's sense of self. You know, the question is like, if you have to give someone both positive and negative feedback, does it matter which order you give it to them in?
I mean, I feel like you should give the bad first, especially like to other people, and then like end it with good so that they remember like the last thing you said. But for me, I feel like it's also a thing of like, what did you see out of them the most? And it's like, if the first thing that pops into your head is like they did more bad than good, it's like gonna be hard to tell them that. But I feel like for me, the reason that telling other people is harder than receiving is because I don't want to like overstep or like get in their lane. You know what I'm saying?
Right. You don't like know if you have permission to.
Yeah. And there's like definitely people on the team that it's like, okay, I can like tell them, but them like I'm not sure, you know?
Right.
So I feel like that's...
It's definitely different for you than it is for me. I mean, I sort of have permission, kind of, because I'm the coach.
Right.
I think the environment probably would be best if everyone gave permission to everyone else.
Yeah.
It would probably like more honest communication would be communicated more frequently if we all just gave each other permission all the time. But that's like obviously easier said than done.
Yeah.
What you said about giving the bad news first and then the good news is sort of like in line with what, like, you know, I think people tell you to do as a coach. Like, you know, they say that, like, I don't know who they is, but like books and stuff like that will say that if you say, hey, you did, you know, X, Y, and Z really, really good, but then they say, like, whatever you say after the but erases everything you said before it.
Right.
Right?
It's like a backhanded compliment.
It's like, hey, you swung really well, you blocked really well, but you couldn't pass to save your life. It's like, then they're not going to remember any of that. Yeah. So, but I think, I actually think it works the other way around too. So if you say, hey, like, you really struggled with this, you really didn't do this well enough, and you didn't follow the plan here, but you guys passed well, you blocked well, and you communicated well. Then you walk away from that feeling like, okay, we did pretty well.
Right.
Right? So it's like, because I think about this after matches, right? Like the match ends, we go back to the box, and it's like, I'm always thinking about, like, what am I going to say here?
Yeah.
And, you know, on one hand, the story of the match is often, hey, you made too many errors, you didn't follow the plan on defense, and, you know, passing really hurt you. Like, does it matter what they did well? Like, what they did well clearly wasn't enough, you know? And on the flip side, if you, like, you hit 1,000, you got a lot of transition opportunities, you served well, but maybe you, I don't know, made some other mistakes. It's like, if the good outweighed the bad, then it's like, that was sort of the story of the match. So, but it's a weird position to be in, to be like, okay, it was more bad than good, but feeling like I have to tell them what good they did, otherwise they're going to be like crushed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Do you think also, I was just thinking about this, like, what's your opinion on, like, you telling players feedbacks to say, like, one person needs more time to, like, handle the feedback, or, like, time before you tell them, and then some are, like, ready to just give it to me? Like, do you think one is better than the other, or, like, as a coach, how do you feel about that?
I think I don't care as much. I understand when people are like certain people after they lose, like, yeah, you can't tell them anything right there, right? Actually, a lot of people are like that. That doesn't really bother me as long as at some point we can, like, have an honest conversation about how it went. I don't think that bothers me. I think it's like the emotions are a part of the game, you know, or a part of practice or whatever. You know, when you try and do something and then, like, it's emotional and then you're frustrated, like, it's okay that, you know, you're not clear-headed enough to be able to take feedback. But as long as you, like, I think that goes where it goes back to, that's where it's your responsibility as a player to be like, hey, like, let me decompress, and then, like, I'm gonna come to you and, like, ask you your thoughts, like, once I, like, cool off. Like, I'm not in a space right now, so, like, hear it. Cool. And then you come and then you ask and then I tell you, and it's like, cool, like, I'm cool with that, you know? That's not really as big of an issue to me as is, like, if people have a bad match, like, I need to be able to tell them, or let's say they have a, whatever, it's good and bad. And, you know, they won or lost. It doesn't really matter what the result was. Like, what matters is that I need to be able to communicate the important information, whether that's stuff they did well or stuff they didn't do well. Like, if I can't communicate that, hey, like, this happens a lot when we would beat a team that's not very good. Doesn't necessarily mean everything you did was good, right? It's like, you beat a team that wasn't any good, but, like, you made a lot of errors, but you got away with it because they made a lot of errors. Like, that's not necessarily okay,
Right.
you know? So, yeah, I mean, the being able to give honest feedback is really, really important. And it's hard because your brain gets so, like, conflicted by all these other factors, like the emotions, specific plays, you know, who you're with, like, all these, like, mixture of, like, there's like this concoction of, like, thoughts and emotions that are in your head, and it's hard to, like, see it from the outside when you're in it, you know?
Yeah. I think it's good to have like time to decompress because it also shows that like you care, like how much you care about the game. And like the same thing goes for this. It's like I hope that the people that I do it with have respect for how much I care about it, and that they like are able to like show the same back whether they do or don't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I have been doing lately is I ask everyone what they think. Like people, like coaching friends of mine, I'm always asking people's opinion. And I always try and respond in a way that's like not defensive. And sometimes I'm defensive, whatever, because I never. But like, I try not to be. I try to be like, hey, what do you think about, like, I used to ask people like, do you think that people perceive me like seriously, like that they take me seriously or not? Or do you think they think I'm like some like young, like stupid bro coaching, you know? And I think that, yeah, the more you do that, the more people are like, oh, this person's like humble, and they care more about how to be better more than what they think is right or what they think is best.
Yeah.
You know, so I think like the exercise that you're doing is really, really good. I found myself doing the same thing. Is like, and I ask people's opinion who like, how do I say this without sounding like people that are like lower than me, you know, people that like coach at a lower level or are younger or are less experienced or whatever. Like, I'll ask everyone. Obviously I value like everyone on the team, for example, probably values the feedback that the coaches will give them because they're like above them.
Right.
Do they value what their peers say? Not as many people do. And do they value what, like, maybe you room with someone from a different sport? If they came to watch your game, like, would you ask them what they thought? Like, you probably would. Other people, would they? Like, would they? And so that's like kind of one of my questions is like, is feedback, which you kind of touched on earlier, but it's like, is feedback equally valuable from everyone?
Yeah.
Like, is feedback from me equally as valuable as feedback from your tennis roommate that came to watch the match and watched you play?
I feel like no, but I think it's important. I feel like it's important to hear, you know? And I was thinking about this too. My English teacher canceled our last class yesterday because we were doing like peer review, and he was like, I don't think it's going to be beneficial. So like he canceled class, which I think like that is true. And like something that's hard with like Chloe.
Why did he say it wasn't be beneficial?
Because like some people don't take it seriously, or like they're not truly reading, they're just like there, you know? And something that goes along with like Chloe's thing of like rating her competitiveness is like some people aren't focused on it, and then it's like, oh crap, I have to write something about her on the board. And it's like, it honestly matters how much they care and how much effort and energy they're like putting on you if they were like truly watching. And like that's where you should like listen to that feedback of like how much somebody is like watching you and like actually saw.
Yeah.
You know?
You're probably right, but I do think that I almost feel like feedback is equally valuable from everyone, just about different things.
Yeah.
Like, what if your tennis roommate comes to watch and she's like, the other team just looked like more energetic than y'all did.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that be like a valuable piece of information to know?
Yeah, I think the coach's opinion is like most valuable, but I think everyone's matters. And like she'll see things that like aren't technical or like things that you won't see, but like you'll see more technical things.
Because for sure, but like people have a pretty like actually good
idea.
People have like a good natural sense of like, how do I say this? Human beings have like a really astute ability to like see things in other people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll ask my parents all the time, they'll come watch the matches and they don't know anything about beach volleyball. Well they do, but like they don't, we didn't grow up with it, so like they just don't know the sport as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll say things and I'll be like, yeah, that's right. Like they'll notice things. They'll be like, oh, so-and-so they looked frustrated with each other. They looked low energy, or they look like, people can like read people really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just like a people skill. It's like, you know, you have a sense of like something's off with them, or their energy's weird, or they look like they're having a lot of fun. They looked really confident, you know, and a lot of the like really small details things, they come out of us in ways that are really visible to like anybody.
People. Yeah.
You know?
What do you feel about like, so like that's like a different like perspective, but what about say like somebody that's high on the lineup and somebody that's low on the lineup? Like what if it's coming from a place of like, you're not good at this, and you know, it's like a different level. Like what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you just got to realize that like everyone is giving feedback through their own lens.
Right.
Right? And you have to, as a person who seeks feedback, you have to like think about why that person is saying that. You know? Because most people are not great at being objective, like about separating their own like bias from it.
Yeah.
Which is okay. You just have to know that. Like I know when I give these feedback things about the coaches, I know that people are gonna have their feedback based on their own experience or their own like situations they've been in.
Yeah.
So it's like I just gotta understand, like if someone at the bottom of the lineup is telling me that whatever, I'm not doing this well enough, even though I think I'm doing it well enough, then maybe it's, first of all, I'm like, are they right? Like, are they right? That's like my first question. You know, after that, this is where people get it backwards, I think. But after that, then I'm asking, okay, like, why is that their perspective? Is that what's really happening? Are they frustrated with themselves and projecting it onto me? Are they trying to bring me down? Is it toxic? Are they trying to help me be better? Are they trying to like make themselves feel better because they're not confident in where they're at right now? Like, you know, so I think the feedback is valuable. It's just like you got to make sure that you're understanding what the feedback is and where and how it's coming from.
Yeah, because I think, like for me,
that's why, last thing, that's why having a coach is valuable, because our only bias generally is toward trying to win. So generally when a coach is telling you something, it ain't for any other reason other than like, we're just trying to like be better. When a teammate tells you something, you would hope it's for the same reason, but it's not always for the same reason. Which is why like even the professionals, like professional beach players, like they hire a coach because like you just can't trust yourself to give objective feedback. Like, and it's not wrong, it's just natural.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it's my job to give objective feedback. That's the thing I'm loyal to. For you, you have all these different sort of like motivations, you know? So that's why the feedback from a coach is actually really important, because there's not as much bias there.
Right.
You know, hopefully we get to a place as a team where we can give each other feedback without bias as well. I don't know if that's truly attainable, but it can be like a goal to be that part of our culture.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I feel like that's true because as players, like, you get so caught in like playing that it's like y'all are seeing outside things and it's like, oh, I didn't even like notice. But I think also, like, for me, I try to do things out of love and like out of good intention, whereas like everybody doesn't have that. So it's like you have to like take the information and not the tone or like where it's coming from, and then like think about it and see if it's right, and then either like take it and run with it or not, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and every once in a while people give like me as a coach feedback, and I'm kind of like, I try to hear what they're saying, but I also can kind of tell that like they're just looking for like an enemy, basically. You know?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes people like they want to make someone else the bad guy so they don't have to like look at themselves.
Yeah.
Like some people don't handle like failure or falling short. They don't handle it really well. It's tough to handle. It's tough on the ego, right? So if you have a fragile ego and I'm telling you that you're not doing good enough, then it's easy to be like, okay, but this and that, and you didn't see this and you didn't see that. It's like, it's a self-protection mechanism.
Yeah.
You know? So it's definitely like, I don't know. I mean, one of my last questions is like, do you think that people can be taught to receive like feedback, or do you think that it's a personality trait?
I think you can like train that skill, but I think it has to be like important to you, you know, because like if it's not something that you care about or it's important, then like you're never going to focus on it. It'd just be like something else that you have. But something like, since I've been here, I feel like I've always been like, I want feedback, you know, but when we're going over that handbook, that's like something that I like thought about is I always try to like not defend myself, but like have you see where I'm coming from, you know, like,
Right.
yeah, I was passing bad, but like it was probably because of this, you know, whereas like I'm taking it, but I'm also trying to let you know where I'm coming from too. But I feel like saying but has like an effect on the person that's trying to tell you feedback too, where it's like they feel like you're holding back or like that you're not actually listening, you know? Yeah. And so that's something that I used to do a lot, and I feel like I've gotten better at since I've been here. Or even when we were discussing.
You used to say okay but a lot?
I would like listen and be like, yeah, I think I'm doing this because, or like but.
You would explain yourself.
Yeah.
And now you don't do it as much.
Yeah.
That's good.
Even like when we were discussing the time for this, I was like, but we could do 10, you know?
Right.
It's just like a thing that I do, but.
Okay, yeah, well, I think everyone does that. I mean,
yeah.
Everyone tries to like explain their side of it, which it's definitely valid.
Yeah.
But definitely, like you said, the opposing perspective is valid regardless of what was on your side. Because like you said, a lot of it is like, that's what an opponent's going to see. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter like what you were trying to do or what you were working on or what you think you were doing. Yeah. Because if someone didn't notice that, then you weren't doing it. Right. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's like if you're saying, for example, like, oh, like we made it a goal to like really be really competitive, mm-hmm. and I was being as competitive as I've ever been. That's the most competitive I've ever been. Like we were doing this, we were doing that, we were doing this. And if I'm playing against you and I say like, I thought it was whatever, I didn't even notice it. You're gonna be like, okay, but we did this, but we did that. And then it's like, I don't really care what you did. Like, I didn't notice it. And if what you're trying to do is something that affects other people, then you're not really doing it unless you're affecting the other people. Now, that's not everything. Like, sometimes, like, your own skill development is just about yourself. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what other people think.
Yeah.
But, like, if the thing that you're trying to do is, like, something that affects an opponent or a teammate, like, maybe you say, I'm trying to be a really supportive team partner today. You know, ask you what you need, blah, blah, blah. be there for you, boost you up. If that's what you're trying to do and you commit to doing it, and your partner says like, yeah, I didn't really notice it that much, then like it doesn't really matter what you. That's where it's like tough for people, because people's response is like, but I did this, but I did that, but I did this. But it's like, but you didn't like achieve the outcome, because the outcome was based on what someone else's perspective was.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, that's the tough part about being on a team, is that your skill development, a lot of the things that happen on the team is based on what the coaches think of what they see. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter if like, I had this conversation like a couple years ago in one of the end of year meetings. Someone's like, I'm playing better than I've ever played. And I'm like, but you're still not. Notice it. No, but I'm like, that's like great, but you're not playing better than other people are playing.
Yeah.
Which is why you are where you are in the lineup or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's a perfect example of like, one perspective is like, this is the best I've ever played. Other perspective, they're thinking about themselves and their development. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about like everyone. So I'm like, it's really tough to be like, because those are truly like conflicting ideas. Mm-hmm. Like for me to be like, I recognize you're playing better than you ever have, but other people are playing better than you.
Yeah.
So like that's like the ultimate tough thing, is like, that's where you really do have to have like confidence to fall back on. Mm-hmm. To be able to say, you know what, like other people's opinions matter in some ways, but in other ways, my opinion is the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
My journey, my process.
Yeah, and I think same thing with like comparing yourself to other people is like, there's a good balance with that too, because you can't get so carried away with like, oh, well, I think I'm better than her at this and then worse at this. It's like, you have to compare yourself so that you know where you're at, but then also like lean on like what you think about yourself, because also something with being here too is like, I've always leaned on like, I'm so competitive, I'm hardworking, like I have such a good attitude. And like when you're like, okay, what is that defined by? Like, how do you define that compared to other people? I'm like, I don't know,
Yeah.
So it's like, other people have to be able to see what you're doing as like your way of comparing yourself to other people. Yeah,
you said it really well. Like, some people say like, don't compare yourself to others, it's like, well, you kind of should a little bit. You can't like judge your whole identity on how it is compared to other people, because you got to be your own person.
Yeah.
But like, it doesn't hurt you to like look around and be like, okay, like what are people doing better than me? What am I doing better than people? Like, where is the opportunity here, and where's like, So it is a really delicate balance to try to do both. Yeah, that's good. Well, any other last thoughts or topics?
What would you do different if you had like my accountability? Well, you kind of said like you would ask everybody, but is there anything that you would like change or do yourself if you had?
I would do it with someone other than just my partner every day. Mm-hmm. And I would give the assignment to someone else each day. I'd be like, hey, I'm doing this, like you're doing this with your partner today too.
Or like on Wednesdays, instead I can make that my day of like, everyone has to do it with their partner from now on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. You could do that. That'd be good. But you also might want to like, if people give you permission, like help them
on that
like
day.
You could be like a mediator between two people. And if someone's like not giving the honest feedback, it's like, hey, like, can she be honest? Yeah, you sure? Okay, then like be honest, whatever.
Yeah, or like have them do it in front of me and then me be like, okay, you need to give her more.
Yeah, or like, for sure. Like teach people, hey, like that's good, but that's not really that meaningful. Like, like that's not gonna create any change,
Yeah, and that would like help me get better at like trying to like be more edgy on like telling other
Yeah,
people stuff
yeah.
too.
Basically, it's like I would just think about like this, like if you think this is a valuable thing, which I think it's a really valuable thing, just people being able to seek and receive honest feedback, then it's like how can you help the team get better at that?
Yeah.
It's not just you and your partner, it's like how can you help other people through that exercise or make everyone do it, or think of creative questions like, you know, hey, what's one thing that you wanted to say to me today but couldn't say or didn't say to me?
Yeah.
What's a thought that you had about me today that you didn't say?
Mm-hmm.
That might be a good question that you just said, hey, ask your partner that question today. Mm-hmm. Or like, you know, what have I done as a partner at any point that has frustrated you? Mm-hmm. You know, like that's like a good, so like thinking of creative ways and creative questions
To get them
to like elicit honest feedback, mm-hmm. you know? That would be a good way to like start having this be a little more impactful and contagious, I think, for the team.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.